on this episode of the Sorority Chat podcast.
My favorite part is probably visiting all these different college campuses and seeing all these sorority houses. I love college. I had a great college experience at the University of Georgia. I lived in a college town, Oxford, Mississippi, and then both my kids went to the University of Alabama. And so I've been on a lot of college campuses just in my own experience, but then when I worked for National Kappa Delta, I was fortunate to work in houses stretching from Rhode Island all the way to California. And so I always loved that part of my life and of my job with National Kappa Delta.
Hey y'all, and welcome to Sorority Chat. I'm Liz Toombs, a designer and sorority alum who's obsessed with all things Greek life. My mission? To bring you real conversations, smart insights, and fun stories that help make sorority living even better. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, and let's chat. Welcome back to Sorority Chat. This week, our guest is my friend Whitney Byars. Welcome, Whitney.
Thank you, Liz. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join your podcast.
Yes. I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about things. So just tell our audience, our listeners, exactly, who you are, what you do, and we'll start there.
Sure. My name is Whitney Byars. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I attended the University of Georgia, where I was a member of the Kappa Delta sorority there. I moved to Mississippi to attend law school in 1989. I practiced law for 5 or 6 years, was a law school professor, and then when my kids got a little bit older, I retired and stayed home with them for several years. Later in life, I had the opportunity to get involved with the Kappa Delta Alumni Association in Oxford, Mississippi, where I was then living. And through that experience, they asked me to join the House Corporation Board for the Kappa Delta chapter at Ole Miss, which was really a lot of fun. The chapter was just starting to think about a building project. They had a sorority house that was 90 years old, and so they asked me to oversee that project as the owner.
Yeah.
And that project then led me to a job with National Kappa Delta, where I worked in the housing department for a couple of years, and I was responsible for managing sorority houses around the country. And that job led me to my current position. I now work with an architect firm based in Lawrence, Kansas. The name of the firm is Treanor. We have offices all across the country, and I work as a client liaison with our Greek clients who are considering fraternity and sorority house projects. So it's a long road here. I'm 58 years old, so I've had a couple of different careers, but I love the new work that I'm doing in the Greek world.
I love that. I like to just let people tell their story because I'm so fascinated with people, what I'll call origin story, and like how you got started, how you ended up where you are. And it's so common, just like what you've said, that people have multiple iterations or seasons professionally or personally in their life. And it's just fascinating to hear about that from folks.
Yes, it's amazing where your life will take you. And I never would have thought when I was a Kappa Delta at the University of Georgia that one day I would be working for National Kappa Delta, and then eventually I'd be working for an architect that specializes in sorority and fraternity houses.
I mean, I feel that deeply. I always joke to my dad. I'm like, hey, all those sorority dues that you paid, like, look at them now. Look at what it turned into for me, a whole career designing these spaces. And I didn't know that walking in the doors all those years ago.
That's right. It's really interesting. I think about that a lot because there are a lot of amazing sororities out there. And had I been in another sorority, would my life have ended up this way? I really think that being involved with Kappa Delta led to my, position that I have now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's really neat to see those stepping stones and how everything built upon the previous things to get you to where you are.
Definitely.
And so for the listeners, Whitney and I first connected when you were at Kappa Delta headquarters. We started running into each other kind of in the Greek housing circuit, and I just always really enjoyed talking with you. And then we've talked even more since you've transitioned over to working from Treanor. And so that's why I was so excited to have you on the pod today.
Yes, Liz and I have known each other for a little while. We're very fortunate that there are two big housing conferences that are held in the Greek industry every year. And it's a great time to get to know potential clients, but it's also a great time to meet other industry partners. And so I was fortunate when I worked for National Kappa Delta, to meet Liz at a conference. And I'm always fascinated by what you do, Liz, because your work is amazing. And it just really makes such a huge impact on a chapter when they have nice furnishings. And so it's been great seeing you at all these conferences. And then my firm has had the pleasure of working with you, Liz. We did a great project together at the University of Georgia for Pi Beta Phi. And I was fortunate enough to go there this past summer and visit, and we did some photography. So the house has turned out amazing. The design, the interior design, everything about it's just fabulous.
Well, you're kind. That was a very fun project, and it was also a very successful project. To date, it's one of the only ones I've walked into that was ready for me to furnish when I got there. It was clean, and I just kept walking around. It was like Christmas morning for me. I was smiling and just, I can't believe it. I can't believe they're ready.
Yes, it's a great house. I mean, it was a really nice exterior facelift to create exterior front that was more appropriate for the size of the building. You may recall that it had columns on the front that really did not fit that size house. So our architects did a great job remodeling the front of that house. And then they also created an addition which allowed the members more space to study and socialize and eat. And the furnishings are just amazing. One of my favorite spaces is that large TV room that also kind of doubles as a study space. I like some of the furnishings that you put in there, especially behind the sofa, those kind of a study table with those slide in little benches and seats.
Yeah.
And it's just really a nice, welcoming, warm space with a lot of natural light. And it's just really a beautiful house.
Now, you make a good point about the natural light, and some of these houses don't have that benefit. So when there are a lot of good windows, it's nice to let that light in. But the tables you mentioned, the console tables, like with some taller stools, that's one of my favorite things to put in these types of spaces because it's so versatile. You know, a console table feels very residential. You know, you could have that backing to your sofa, but then when you have those additional stools up underneath it, it adds the element of extra seating, which is so necessary in these spaces because, you know, you may have 50, 75 women living in, but you have hundreds of women coming in on the day to day. And so we have to find all the seating that we can for them.
That's right. And, you know, it's interesting you mentioned about it having a residential feel. Sorority houses and fraternity houses, for that matter, are commercial projects with a residential feel. And so a lot of these projects have steel construction and a lot of commercial components to them, but we want these spaces to feel like a home. And so it's been so great working with you so that you can give these sorority houses a homey feel. This is truly a home away from home for these young women. But you also have to recognize that there are hundreds of women using these spaces every day. One thing that you did in the Pi Phi house at the University of Georgia that I thought was brilliant was the dining room that the members use also doubles as a chapter room. And so they have to quickly transition from eating in this room to having a meeting in this space. And Liz found some, and you might have had them made, but some great dining room tables that the top folds down. And so they can easily fold them up and slide them into a storage space so that the members can use the space for meetings or recruitment. And you having that understanding of how a sorority functions enabled you to find the perfect furniture for that space.
Yeah, well, it's becoming so common now because the chapters are bigger that we're having to have those multi-purpose spaces. So you don't necessarily just have a chapter meeting room and a separate dining room. You're seeing a lot of that hybrid, just like you talked about.
Right.
And so, yeah, you have to find those versatile solutions where the women aren't having to pick up four-legged tables and flip them over and stack them on top of each other. I just visited 2 properties yesterday, and that's what they're having to do. And I was like, I think we might have some better solutions for that. We don't have to be Hercules and picking all that stuff up and shifting it around, because you're potentially risking injury, or you're going to damage the furniture too. So there's just a lot of downsides to kind of regular furniture in those spaces.
Correct. And I think one thing that makes you and your firm unique, just like it makes our firm unique, is that we both understand how sororities function. A sorority is really a business, and there's so many young women in these chapters, and they have a valuable asset. And it's important that we design spaces that work for those groups. And what sets, I think, PDR Interiors apart and Treanor Architects apart is that we understand their business, and we can design spaces from an architectural standpoint, and you can design spaces from an interior design space that works for those groups, because we understand recruitment, right? A lot of architects might not understand what happens when you have thousands of women come through your house in 1 week. We understand initiation. We understand the importance of having space to store their initiation ritual supplies. We understand that they have parents' weekend, and so they have to have large event spaces. And then most importantly is we understand the numbers, the sheer volume of people that come in that house. And we understand that you have to have finishes that will support that large traffic flow.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And you did a good job of kind of highlighting where I wanted to go next, which is sometimes people don't understand the difference between what an architect does or what a design team does and how they work together or don't. And we have worked together. We worked together on this project. We've done one up at Rhode Island. And so talk a little bit about, like, as far as your team goes, kind of what the architect's lane is. And then I can kind of speak to how we're able to all collaborate and work together.
Sure. All architects work with their clients to plan their spaces, whether you're doing a home, an office building, or a sorority house. But I think a Greek architect has to think about where the sorority sees itself in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so we need to understand if perhaps your membership numbers will increase. We're seeing increases in enrollment at a lot of colleges. We're seeing Greek numbers dramatically increase. And so we really work with our clients to master plan their spaces, whether it's the chapter room, the number of bedrooms, your dining capacity. And so we like to see ourselves as a partner with our clients to understand their business, what their needs are, what their goals are, and then we design those spaces. And, we do a lot of renovations, but we do a lot of new builds. We may work with a group to just renovate a kitchen, but we've worked on all different size projects, but we really see ourselves as a planner. And how can we design a building? How can we design a space that functions better and that supports the programs of the sorority?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, you're so right. You have to look down the road for what you're creating and how it will serve them rather than just the right now.
That's right. We have too many groups that come to us that have recently renovated their house or built a new house, and they're 3-5 years down the road, and the house is no longer working for them. And so that tells us that they didn't really think about the future and they didn't plan. And I think that's what sets us apart, you apart from groups that don't work with Greek clients, is we really understand how they're using the house, and we understand those potential changes in their organization.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Do you think when those situations have come up, do you think that they were more focused on like the dollar amounts, or what kind of distracted them instead of seeing down the path a little bit further?
I think money probably affects it a lot because what we are seeing is with increased construction cost and such high interest rates that
Mm-hmm.
groups can't afford to do much. But I think if you work with a team that doesn't have Greek experience and they don't understand how a group functions, they don't ask the right questions. They
Mm-hmm.
don't ask how many women attend chapter meetings. They don't ask what type of audiovisual amenities do you need in a chapter room. They don't ask how many people participate in a meal plan and how many show up at one time and what time of day
Mm-hmm.
do they show up. They don't ask questions like, are you going to move your tables and chairs out of the dining room for recruitment? And so then they
Mm-hmm.
don't put a storage room in the house, and then the sorority's having to rent an off-site storage unit. And so I think that we just know the questions to ask, and then we have the experience. For myself, I work as the client liaison, and I was a member of a sorority. I've been an advisor. I still act as an advisor for a sorority. And so I know what they're doing in the house every day. And if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that, I think you miss things when you design a house.
I think so too. I think you have to. You specifically are so valuable there because you have worked on the client side. You were a member. You are an advisor, and then now you're on what I'll call the vendor side. And so you're kind of putting all of that together to recognize what needs to be done in the house. So I think that's
I'll
really great.
also add that I also have experience as a parent because I have a daughter who
Mm-hmm.
lived in the sorority house for 2 years. So I
Mm-hmm.
understand that the concerns that parents have about safety and moving in and out, and is that an easy process? Is there an elevator to get all your stuff up to the second or third floor? And so I have that perspective as well. And I think that's why Treanor recognized that we could better serve our clients by bringing me in, because I have served in so many roles and I see things from a different perspective, and that helps make our designs better.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Just having worked with a variety of architecture firms, there's all different levels of understanding, but your team does truly get it. So when you say client liaison, what exactly does that look like for you? Like, what is your role and how do you affect the project or interact with people?
Sure. I work with a client throughout the entire process. I might meet a client 3 or 4 years before their
Yeah.
project even goes into construction. We have a lot of groups that are starting to consider a renovation project or a new build project. And when they reach out to our firm, I have that initial meeting with them to find out more about what their goals are for their project. And I'm really there to help ensure that their project is successful.
Mm-hmm.
So, our initial conversation really is an opportunity for me to learn more about their chapter and to find out about the other groups on their campus. What are the competitors doing?
Mm-hmm.
What's the size of their chapter? How old is your house? When's the last time you did a renovation project? But to try to just get some history of the chapter and of the building itself. And then I make suggestions about things that I think will help them be successful. I have been in their position. I was the owner client at one time, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And so I want to try to help our clients so that they don't make mistakes that maybe I made or other groups made. It's very expensive to
Yeah.
build a house or to renovate a house. And if their finances are not in order, their project may never become a reality. So I try to
Mm-hmm.
help them early on to make sure they're building up a reserve, to make sure they're charging an appropriate amount of rent, to make sure that they've explored all sources of revenue. I also encourage them to work with other partners in the Greek housing industry that can help them set up a budget and do a pro forma so that they can determine how much they can actually afford. We don't like to design a house that a sorority can't afford and will never build. And we have a lot of groups that they don't have any idea what they can afford. And so I'm proud that our firm really puts an emphasis on the importance of a good budget and a pro forma, because it's really unfair to a group to take their money, design a house that we know they can't build because of expenses. So we really put an emphasis on that. And I work with them during that project. I can refer them to someone that can help them. And then, just suggest things that they should consider as they move forward, making sure that they are doing a good job with chapter and alumni relations. It's so important that you have alumni events, that you have alumni communication, because when it's time to do fundraising, you want them to understand what the sorority is going through. We also, make recommendations about fundraising. There are a lot of great fundraising companies out there, and we can make referrals to different companies so that they can find some funding for their project. So I work kind of at the front end, and then once they're ready to get started with our firm, our architects will meet with them and learn more about the chapter. We call this programming, and we understand how they use their house. They give us information about what they like and what they don't like. I sit in on those meetings, and I may offer input like, you may not need a backpack room because the women take their backpacks to the table and they pull all their personal items out. So you don't need a backpack room. Or during recruitment, you need to think about this and that. So I kind of sit in on those meetings, and then the architects will do the design. They'll ask for my input. And then, of course, we share that with the client. But I'm also here if the client is ever confused about the process or they don't understand some of the terminology, they can call me at any time for anything. And I will say the best thing about myself is that I'm free. So our firm does not charge our clients any extra to work with me. I even had a sorority at the University of Georgia that called me and asked me something completely unrelated to building design. They wanted to know where to find a good videographer for their recruitment video.
Oh, wow.
And I was happy to do that. So I had some contacts on campus, and I reached out to a couple of groups, and I got that information for her. So I really will do anything. And then I'm there during the construction, visiting the site occasionally. And then at the end, I'm excited to go in and see the finished product and work with our photographers to document the project so that we can put it on our website and share it with other clients.
Yeah, I think that's great. It sounds like you're a very valuable resource then if folks are calling you up and asking for other adjacent or unrelated things.
Well, I kind of laugh and say that I've made a lot of best friends doing this, because I think the women and the volunteers for these sororities really feel comfortable with me. And, I want to see everyone be successful. I think that the more successful the groups are, it's better for everyone. And I don't see it as a competitive environment. I think that we're all better if we can help each other. And so I love it. I really just love working with the different volunteers for different groups.
Yeah, I can tell that. Well, so backing up for a second, you said pro forma a couple times. So that's kind of industry jargon. So do you want to talk a little bit about exactly what that is so folks listening know what that means?
Sure. So a pro forma is really just a financial document. It's very similar to a budget. And there are a lot of great people in our industry that can create a pro forma for you. They basically take all of your sources of income and all of your expenses, and they determine what your net operating income is. Because when you do go to a bank to get a loan, a bank is going to want to see your pro forma to see what you can afford. And a lot of groups don't have that. A lot of groups may have a budget for the current year, but they don't have a very detailed pro forma. A pro forma will also project your income and expenses for the next several years, and that's going to be very important to a bank. But that really helps you decide what you can afford. Most groups in the country need some type of renovation project. Most groups cannot afford a project. And so you really got to start planning early, and you've got to start increasing your revenue. You've got to start building a reserve. And there's just so much to think about. So we occasionally will help a client with a pro forma. It's a service that we can do. Our studio leader, Steve Moline, has done 1 million pro formas, but there are a lot of great people out in the industry that we've worked with that can complete a pro forma as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you explained that and I'm also glad you talked about you coming in, maybe 3 years in advance of construction starting, because I also don't think people have a very good understanding of what the lead time is for these kinds of projects. If it's a small project, yes, you can have a shorter runway. But when you're talking about a major renovation or a tear down and rebuild, it is years upon years, because you have to start planning, you have to do the pro forma, you have to fundraise. Like you said, there's so many elements to it that take time. And that's before you even get into what I consider to be the fun stuff, which is the architectural drawings. And then like what my team does with all the finishes and the furnishings and all the pretty finishing touches to create the space.
That's right. We usually work, once a sorority is ready to get started, our conceptual design process can take anywhere from 2 to 4 months, because we come to the site, we inspect the building. Occasionally, we may need a structural engineer to visit the site with us so that we can determine the condition of the building. And we like to meet with a few chapter members. We meet with the volunteers, all the important stakeholders to determine what we need to put into our design. And we call that programming. And it's really the recipe for the design. And we design the building. We send it to the House Corporation Board and other volunteers to get their feedback. We may make some revisions. And at some point when we're finished and everyone approves the design, we will put it into a colored presentation format so that they can share it when they're doing fundraising. Our work is usually done in 2 phases. That first phase is the conceptual design phase. And what we find is that most groups will then take those color drawings and then they go do fundraising. And that fundraising phase can be 2 to 3 months. It's more likely to be a year. And they'll work with a fundraising company to start raising money for their project. And what a lot of volunteers don't understand is that when you go out and start raising money, some individuals that make a gift may make it over a 5-year period. So you don't necessarily get your money immediately. So that's why it's really important to have been fiscally responsible, building your reserves, making sure your income is such that you're not relying just on fundraising dollars. But our groups will take a pause for fundraising. And then when they are making some good progress and they've gone to the bank and they've secured a loan, they will come back to us and say, hey, we're ready to get started now. Well, once they tell us that, we have to develop construction documents, which is not done overnight. It takes a little bit of time. And at that point is when we like to be working with an interior designer such as yourself, so that we can look at the spaces that we've drawn, so that we can ensure that there's space for the furniture they already have. We can make sure that the capacity in the dining room is accurate. And Liz does a great job helping us with that. And we appreciate that you understand the spaces and you can do your own drawings with the furniture and make sure that everything fits. So, and Liz also does a great job making sure that we have the correct lighting, that we have light switches in the right places, that, we don't want to put a pull down fire alarm right in the smack middle of the wall where she was going to put some artwork. And so we worked together with Liz, early in that process to make sure we get all the details right. And So that process can take anywhere from 6 to 12 months to get the documents together, to work with our clients to hire a contractor. Permitting can take a long time. We've worked on a property in Florida, and the permitting took as long as 4 months. And so you've got to consider all of those things. And then your construction project, if it's a significant renovation or a new build, can take anywhere from 12 to 16 months. So this is really a long process, and there's a lot to think about. And we want to make sure that our clients know all of that and that they're prepared for the long haul.
Well, yeah. And so everything you've just kind of broken down timeline wise, imagine you have been in this role, but a volunteer who doesn't do this every day like national headquarters does, the decision fatigue and just the fatigue in general, because they've committed, 4 and 5 years of their life to this project. So having someone like you to go alongside them, I think is very valuable, and just coaching them through the process and kind of keeping the energy up.
Yeah, I think it does help. And we also recommend to our clients that they form several committees so that you don't have just one person doing that. We recommend a building committee, a finance committee, a fundraising committee, and a chapter committee. And we try to guide them through that process, and we give them information about what the different committee members will do and how they should work together, because there is a lot that goes into a project like this. And it's hard sometimes to find volunteers who are busy with their own careers and families to take the time to do this. So it is a big commitment, but it's so important to these chapters because they really need a group of dedicated alumni that will help them make their housing a reality.
Yeah, totally. You're so right. What's your favorite part of your job, Whitney?
My favorite part is probably visiting all these different college campuses and seeing all these sorority houses. I love college. I had a great college experience at the University of Georgia. I lived in a college town, Oxford, Mississippi, and then both my kids went to the University of Alabama. And so I've been on a lot of college campuses just in my own experience. But then when I worked for National Kappa Delta, I was fortunate to work in houses stretching from Rhode Island all the way to California. And so I always loved that part of my life and of my job with National Kappa Delta. So I'm so lucky now that in my role at Treanor, I still have the opportunity to visit college campuses and to go into sorority houses. And I just really get the best feeling when I know we can really help a group. It's just such an amazing experience, and I just want them to be successful. I want their members to have that part of the entire collegiate experience. I just think it really enhances that time at college when they have a great house. And if our firm can play a part in making that even better, it's a great experience for me as well.
I say that all the time, that we're creating the backdrop for their college memories and a space that's supporting them through these years. So really, it may not stand out when they think back to what color the paint was or what color the sofa was, but that's the memories that happen in the space. That's what we're supporting, and the women who are living in the house. And
that's right.
I fully agree with you on. It is so fun to travel the country and see the different architectural styles of these houses, the cultures on campus, and just all the different regions and how things are done differently.
Definitely.
I think that's super neat. In your opinion, what's the number one thing that makes a renovation or a new build project successful?
I would say on the behalf of the volunteers of the organization, the best thing they can do is be organized and be prepared.
Okay.
And, because we do have groups that will come to us and say, we need to do a renovation. We want to get started this summer. And they're not prepared and they're not organized. They don't have their financial documents in order to even have a pro forma prepared, and they don't have a realistic timeline. So I would say being organized and being prepared is very important.
I think that is good advice. I have had several instances where folks have come to us a little ill prepared, and I've sadly had to say, we can't do it in this timeline or we can't get it together. And been fortunate that they'll call back the next year and say, okay, we're ready. We got our ducks in a row and now we're ready to go. So
Sure. Well, and in a sorority house, you've got to have commercial grade fabrics on furniture.
yes.
And so there's a lead time that you
Mhm.
need, I know, to get things ordered. And since
Mhm.
COVID, my guess is that lead time is a lot longer than it used to be. And
It's getting
so,
better.
oh, that's great. That's good.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
hopefully construction prices and interest rates will get better too, but I'm not so sure.
I know. That's so tough. I mean, since 2020, we've had a couple of projects, two or three specifically coming to mind, that they had to go back to the drawing board multiple times because when the prices would come in, they couldn't afford the materials and things just kept changing constantly. And you're chasing a moving target as the prices continue to go up. I mean, you know this.
They really have. Before COVID, we could do a new build for about $350 a square foot.
Hmm.
And new builds now range from anywhere to $500 to $600 a square foot. And that's really been tough for groups. We had a couple of organizations we were working with before COVID on plans, and then they paused for fundraising, and they have
Hmm.
been unable to start their projects because construction costs are so expensive and they just don't have the revenue to move forward. So we've had a handful of groups that have moved from a new build to renovation. And
Hmm.
then we've had some groups that just continue to pause their projects so that they can work to increase their reserve and
Hmm.
continue to fundraise.
And it's disheartening when that happens because they've put in so much work, they've engaged professionals to help with it, and then when it can't go forward and it keeps stalling out, it's just incredibly disappointing. But I think that also speaks to the importance of having folks that are familiar with Greek housing because you can figure out a way to phase things. I know that you all do this, I do this. You figure out what can be done now for the budget and then come up with kind of a longer term phased plan of how all of the things will be done. It's just not all going to be done in this first swoop of construction and updates.
That's exactly right. And we do that with a lot of our clients, especially since COVID. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why having an architect that can work on master planning your project is so important.
Uh-huh.
We met with a group just last week that's considering a project, and their funds are limited, but they have a lot that they need to do. And we said, hey, that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. You're going to be in this sorority house for 100 years or more. And so
Uh-huh.
it's okay if you can't do everything right away, but let's make sure that you're making smart decisions about what you are doing. Let's
Yeah.
not do a project this summer, which will affect what you do in 3 to 5 years. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you just say, hey, let's just renovate the dining room, well, that may affect what you do in 3 to 5 years. We
Mm-hmm.
worked with a group that wanted to do some renovations to their bedrooms. And we said, yes, that's great. But when we change out the HVAC system here, it may affect another part of your house. So let's look at your entire house and think about your goals for the next several years. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of groups are starting to do phased projects, and it makes it more affordable. But the planning is even more essential to do if you're going to do a phased project.
Absolutely. You have to kind of have a master plan and then have it broken down into chunks with some flexibility, I think, because the products may change or needs may change, but you have to have some kind of overall vision of where it's going so that you're not just piecemealing it, like you said, and just every year reacting to something that needs to be done because you have some funding.
Exactly. And flexibility, I think, is key because so
Mm-hmm.
many things can change. The size of your chapter can
Yeah.
drastically change. I've seen a lot of universities that used to have under 100 in a new member class that are approaching 200. That can change. Your sources of income can change. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
campuses add more sororities and your numbers may go down. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
to be flexible if you do a master plan. But that's why working with an experienced architect and experienced interior designer is so important because they see that in the industry and they know that's a possibility and they take those things into consideration when they are doing your master planning.
Yeah, you were so right. You were so right. I've loved this whole conversation, but I have to say one of my favorite little tidbits was I did not know before we started talking today about the law school professor component. I knew that you were, a recovering lawyer and all of that, but talk to me about what it was like to be a law school professor.
That was the best job. I had the opportunity when my children were small to go back and teach at Mississippi College School of Law. I was a student there and loved my time. But when I had two small children, it was really difficult to be an attorney when I had to travel all the time. I'd have a hearing at 8 a.m., 3 hours away, and that was difficult. So I had the opportunity to join the faculty at Mississippi College. I taught legal writing to all of the first-year students. We had 150 students. And so I did that for 4 years and just loved it. I love the academic environment. And I think that's one reason I like this job so much is it gets me on college campuses. And when I was at the law school, we were on a separate campus, but I loved working with the students. And the last 2 years I was there, you'll get a kick out of this, I was actually the assistant dean for student affairs. Oh. So in addition to my professor position, I worked with students with just matters that would come up that affected their schedule or things going on in their lives, and got to work one-on-one with a lot of students. And I think I got that position because no one else wanted to do it. But but I guess I like to talk, and so I was perfect for that role.
Oh, that's funny. I love that, though. And I also was a very brief college professor. I
didn't know that.
Yeah, it was 2020. I went back to my old program at the University of Kentucky because I've always taken in interns and do a lot of mentoring through the business. I think you knew that part. But yes. I just was seeing maybe some learning gaps from academia to like real life application. And I just said, hey, I'm not going to just complain about this. Can I come in and like help you with the students? And so I taught a soft skills class, and we did a lot of like real world application about like having difficult conversations, writing thank you notes, how to dress for your profession, all of those kinds of intangible things that you weren't really getting in the program. And I loved it. But then spring break happened. COVID hit and the students never came back. And so we went to Zoom. And even that I still really enjoyed because like you're saying, I enjoyed connecting with the students. And I found out after the semester was over, because it was soft skills, I still told them they had to show up at the day and time of our class. Like we needed eye contact. We needed to be able to interact with each other. And I had a couple of them say I was the only instructor that kept the class time and that made them have their cameras on. And so I was like, well, I hope that you found value in that because I thought it was pretty important that those factors, maintain consistency.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the grown-up world, relationships are so important.
Yes.
And so you can't have relationships with people if you're not comfortable face to face, making eye contact. And so I'm glad to hear you did that. And that will benefit them in their careers.
I hope so. I have some concerns that, now that we're in such a digital age, even more than we were pre-2020, I think there's a lot of social awkwardness. And so I'm hoping that we can get back to that one-on-one and like in-person human connection. And I could probably do a whole podcast just on that, but
yes,
I think we need it.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I'm still a volunteer for Kappa Delta. I actually volunteer at 2 different chapters, and I can see that the young women are so dependent on their telephones, and sometimes they are better at sending someone an email as opposed to just going and asking them for a donation or to sponsor an event. So we're working with them on that, encouraging them to get out and meet face-to-face with people in person.
I mean, it's so funny. If I have like a young person speak to me or shake my hand or pick up the phone and call me, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like they don't do that, right? I didn't get a text message or just a random one-off email with like bad punctuation. Like they actually were like engaging, and that makes me very happy.
Yes, I agree. I 100% agree.
Oh, well, Whitney, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I really enjoyed the conversation. It was great to get to know you more personally, but also talk about our projects and just something that folks need to know about what it's like to work with architect teams and what the process looks like to go through building and construction.
Yes, well, I appreciate you having me here. You've designed some fabulous houses, and we've been fortunate to work with you, and I hope that we can work on another project soon. We have seen a lot of groups starting to get back into planning projects. I think people kind of pause things for a while, but in just the last couple of weeks, we've gotten several calls from potential new clients. So we're looking forward to those projects and hope we get to work with you on one of them.
Yes, likewise. And 'tis the season for project planning. So
that's right.
On that note, if folks want to get in touch with you, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Well, we have a new website that has several images of a lot of our houses, and our website is just treanor.design. Treanor is spelled TREANOR.design. And I'm Whitney Byars. If you go on to our website, when you look under specialties, just look for housing, and then you can find our housing studio. And we have examples of a lot of our houses. We've got a really nice new video of a project that we did for Pi Beta Phi at the University of Missouri, and it's really fun. It's a video of some of the young women seeing the house for the first time, and it's fun to see their excitement. It kind of gives you some chills and makes you want to go back and live in a sorority house.
Oh, that's my favorite, to see their faces and hear their reactions, even though it makes me slightly deaf because of the squeals. It makes all the work worthwhile.
That's right. Yes. So, so anyone, please reach out. We'd be happy to talk to you. Sometimes we have groups that just reach out to me and say, I just need help figuring out how to get started. And so, again, I'm here to help our groups be successful. And anything that I can do and Treanor can do to help, we're happy to do so.
You heard her, folks. Call her for construction, call her for videography, whatever you need. Whitney can do it. We will have all of Whitney's links in the show notes of today's episode. Thanks, Whitney.
Thank you, Liz.
Welcome to Liz's House Hot Takes. This is where I take the lessons I've learned over the last 16 years of designing Greek houses and offer you my pro tips. Overhead lighting may not be your friend. Harsh fluorescents don't scream homey. Swap them out or soften the vibe by just changing the bulb. You want to use warm-toned LED light bulbs. This will be for your floor lamps, table lamps, sconces, or your chandeliers. This will make your space feel cozy and inviting. You'll really be amazed at the difference just changing the lighting can make. Thanks for listening to another House Hot Take. For more inspiration, check out the PDR Interiors Instagram or TikTok. I'm Liz Toombs, and this is the Sorority Chat Podcast. Catch you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're listening on a podcast platform, make sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. And if you got something out of today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to check out this video right here or this one over here. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. On that note, I'm Liz Toombs with Sorority Chat, and I'll see you on the next one. This podcast is produced by Collier Landry for Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Liz Toombs.